What I've presented so far encompasses the bulk of what I cover in my university drawing classes at the first 3 levels, what someone might typically study from their freshman through junior years. In this final lecture, I'll outline some advanced and senior level projects. While this lecture is about 30 minutes, the projects could take 6 months or more to realize. Some are directly related to topics discussed in the last lecture. They'll help you expand on what you've learned and try some alternate approaches. I hope they'll help you locate your own areas of interest. I think you'll find the process enjoyable and stimulating. At the beginning of the last lecture, I paraphrased Ben Shahn, saying that there were 2 important questions to consider. What shall I draw, and how shall I draw it? In developing your own drawing, these 2 questions are pivotal. There are large nominal classes of subjects, like still lifes, interiors, landscapes, and the figure. In understanding these nominal subjects, it's critical to note the importance of what I'd call approach. Here's what I mean. While one artist might approach a still life with purely formal concerns, another might approach it to explore a theme, like mortality, or fertility, or consumerism. For example, most Cézanne still lifes are formal, but there are many European still lifes that are narrative, like the subgenres of memento mori and vanitas, serving to remind that life here on earth is temporary. Approach can be partially designated by a term. Many of these end in ism, like impressionism or cubism, and we have other designators like baroque or pop art. And these terms all have their uses, but they tend to be imprecise. Degas and Monet are often lumped together as impressionists, yet their methods and approach were quite different. Similarly, Van Gogh and Gauguin are considered post-impressionists, but their drawings and paintings have distinct concerns. Overall, I found it more useful to ask what kind of problem an artist was interested in, or ask what the goal of a project was. And I'd accompany these kinds of questions with those that helped me reverse engineer the work and understand the methodology. What were the materials? What was the procedure? The role of problem solving and procedure is significant. Let me offer an example. A common challenge in drawing is developing eye-hand coordination. There's an exercise called blind contour that's designed to address this. Here's the gist. Draw observationally with line, any subject, but don't look at the page. Only look at the subject. Link your eye to your hand. As you trace over the edges of your subject with your eye, the pencil travels across the surface in tandem. Blind contours always have a look to them, and that's rooted in the procedure. Try it. I think you'll see what I mean. If you saw a blind contour and liked it, you might be tempted to copy the look, try to imitate the style, but that would be quite different than making a blind contour with an understanding of the problem and adoption of the methodology. The point is, often, the reason why a drawing looks the way it does is because the artist was tackling a specific problem, and in response, they invented or adopted a set of procedures. When you consider these questions, what problem or question the artist was tackling, you developed a more profound understanding of what's behind a given work. And understanding things in this way puts you in a better position to understand how you might work on similar problems or on the problems that intrigue you. Let's look at a couple examples. Thomas Eakins and Claude Monet were contemporaries, both born in the 1840s and both studied painting in Paris in the 1860s. But the projects and procedures they adopted couldn't have been more different. Eakins was interested in verisimilitude, in accuracy and precision. That was his project. How do you get there? What kind of methodology will work? In an earlier lecture, I quoted W. Douglas Paschal on Eakins. He wrote that he saw his work as accretions, as collections of parts to be worked up in succession from sketches, memory, and life study. And he used perspective studies and photographs too. Monet's interests lay elsewhere. He wasn't interested in naturalistic precision. Among his primary foci, at least for several decades, were light and color, how the play of light at different times of day and different weather conditions could be interpreted in different palettes, and how a given subject is transformed materially by atmospheric conditions, both its mood and its seeming dimensionality. How do you tackle this problem? Well, identify your subject, go there and set up, draw as much as possible from direct observation. As the light and weather change, start anew drawing or painting. If you engage with Aiken's methodology, constructive multi-step, synthesizing many pieces of visual data, you end up with one result. Following Monet's procedure, quite another. And this is how artists develop bodies of coherent work. It's nothing more than finding a problem to work on and a set of procedures appropriate to that problem. Then it's a matter of playing out the intriguing variations that occur to you. When you do this, you set yourself up to make some interesting discoveries. So, let's get into some projects. My goal for you is that you relate technical and formal considerations, things like line, shape, space, composition, proportion, value, texture, and color, to your own subject matter and content. And I want you to begin to explore different means for the creation of drawings, including observation, construction, and abstraction, and also the use of specific source material. In the lecture on the armature and composition, we learned that drawings have abstract structures. And in the last lecture, we saw how Mondrian's landscape had a particular abstract structure comprised of horizontals and verticals. The first project I'll describe here involves developing a drawing with a spatial structure that has depth, but doesn't function like a Renaissance window or box. It's a space without gravity. There are two ways to set this up. The first involves selecting a complex, naturalistic figurative painting, one with a compelling structure. The goal is to abstract the structure, to abstract the architecture lying beneath all the figurative elements. Then use that structure to create your drawing. Best to find a large, high-quality reproduction of the painting you select. You could start directly on your paper, first creating a format shape that's proportionate to the original. Then, lightly drawing the lines that mirror the structure of the painting, the large divisions in the ground, the aggregate figure shapes, and the subshapes within both. You could also start with a piece of tracing paper over the reproduction and trace the lines, horizontals, verticals, and diagonals that reveal the painting structure. If you're working with a digital image, you could do this in a program like Photoshop. In either case, the next step is to draw a proportionate format and structure lightly on a sheet of paper. The resulting drawing should consist of lines and shapes, pretty flat, parallel to the picture plane, no box, no real planes. The next step is your own invention. Begin to use line weight to suggest a hierarchy, and no need to follow the painting structure at this point. Turn your lines and shapes into planes and volumes, but without reference to gravity. To aid in this, you might want to rotate the drawing every 15 minutes as you draw, each time responding as if the bottom edge had gravity. In the end, many of the assertions will contradict one another, and you'll have succeeded in creating a very different kind of visual space than in prior drawings. A second way of attacking this is to simply start with some form of armature derived from a given format shape, like we did in the lecture on that subject. This will also give you a fairly flat linear structure. Everything will be parallel to the picture plane and progress the same way. Begin to create a hierarchy using line weight, then planes, and volume. As a final step, you could take this back into figuration, adding any elements you might want. You could use prior drawings done from observation as source material, but avoid the primacy of a floor plane and a single point of view. Here's an example. So, this is a drawing project where we could start with figuration, a reproduction of a figurative painting, move to abstraction, and then back to figuration, all within the same drawing. Here's another, though the initial structural lines are very light. A related project entails drawing the rectangle's armature and using this as a jumping off point to improvise with abstract volumetric structures in space. The essential idea is that abstraction and figuration are intimately connected, not opposites. They exist along a continuum. Here's another project that will extend your understanding of composition in space. Start observationally, but instead of drawing from a fixed point of view, draw from multiple points of view. And instead of drawing a given object once, it can be repeated as many times as needed. In addition, instead of keeping all the proportions related naturalistically, here the proportions can vary to serve the composition. You could start by using the figure, but this could be done with any subject. And if you are using the figure, anything else in the room can be interpolated from the architecture of the room to any of the other objects you see. You could use your drawing materials that are sitting next to you, or your foot, or the drawing itself. I'd suggest using line because it'll allow you to concentrate on composing the elements without having to think about value or color. But using value and color would be great variations on this project later on. Let's take a look at a couple examples. You'll note here that we have a strong aggregate shape, a triangle that holds the disparate elements together. Composition's one of the challenges in this drawing. You're working additively. The shapes aren't there in front of you for you to see and to be seen all at one time. So you have to think strategically as you build the drawing. If you try this on 18 by 24 inch paper, make the drawing's format anything but 18 by 24 inches. As you build the composition, consciously find the right format shape. Pay attention to the large planes in the room where you're drawing. Consider using them to structure the space. Like the figure, these architectural elements can be sized and repeated as needed. You'll note on the left, we have the corner of the room showing two walls and a ceiling. We get it repeated at a smaller scale in the doorway in the upper right. Sometimes I'll pose the model sitting on a ladder. This drawing made great use of it. The ladder serves as both a geometric scaffolding and a powerful actor skewering the dismembered figure. There are many variants on this project. One is to do this in a more limited way by minimizing the shift of location and retaining all proportions accurately. Here's the procedure. Start drawing in one location. Keep things light. Work for 15 to 20 minutes. Then move a couple feet to the right. Draw what you see from this view on top of the first. Then move a couple feet to the left of the first view and repeat. Then begin to weave the three views together. One of the things I'd like you to consider is how one drawing could serve as source material for another. This allows you to have a dialogue with yourself surrounding visual themes. As noted, this has to do with the way many artists build a body of work. They let one piece suggest a second, a third, and a fourth. So try using a drawing you did from multiple viewpoints as a source for a new drawing. You're no longer drawing directly from observation, but from a drawing you just made. And at this point, you could include some value. For instance, you could have 10 to 20% hatching, while the rest of the drawing remains line. The goal is to assign the hatching to what should be the focal area and focal point. The woman who did this drawing used it as a basis for this drawing. You'll note how the hatching supports the drawing's visual hierarchy. It helps to make the central figure dominant. As Ben Shahn suggests, it's important for aspiring artists to determine what they want to draw. But then it's important to find the source materials needed to make a given drawing. This project will get you thinking about this. For this project, continue working with multiple viewpoints and multiple scales. But ask yourself what you'd like to draw about. Define a theme or idea. You can use any of your prior drawings as source materials, but you could also make new and specific studies for this drawing, like Michelangelo or Eakins often would. These could be perspective studies, studies of specific objects or places or rooms. Look to a wide range of source material, from other artworks to literature to something from popular culture, or really anything else you might be interested in. Here the theme was food, a contemporary cornucopia. There's a very intricate play between the angular zigzagging structure of the boxes and table and the very organic shapes of the food itself. One of the things that begins to happen as you take on these kinds of projects is that your work becomes more individual, because you're drawing things that have some greater meaning to you. Here we begin to get a mashup of different types of representation, from the illustrational to characters related to cartooning. Other individuals go in a more fantastic direction, robotic figures and ominous creatures. When you begin to find out what you want to draw about, it becomes engrossing. Or menacing hands crawling through an architectural space. Other individuals go in a more personal and contemplative direction. This is by the same young woman who made the drawing of the figure being skewered by the ladder. That became an important visual theme she carried through a number of drawings. And that's pay dirt. That's what you're looking for. Visual themes that mean something to you. Next, you could tackle a related project with a more traditional spatial construct, very much following Aiken's methodology. You could combine figure studies with perspective studies and even use photographs to support the finished work. Select a figure drawing you did and use it as if it had been made as a study for your drawing of your own device. Once again, consider subject matter and content, and supplement the figure study with any other source material you might need, perspective studies, web research, and the like. I'd encourage you to consider the following questions. What's the subject? What's happening in the drawing? Where's the figure located? What kind of place is it? It's a good idea to do some preliminary, quick gestural sketches to work out your composition. Then get the source material you'll need to complete the drawing. This drawing uses a standing male figure study. He gets flipped mirror image to serve the composition. The architecture is invented using linear perspective, and visual sources were found for the Sphinx, the lion's head, columns, and tree limbs. Here again, we start with the standing male. The gallery is created using linear perspective. Visual resources were used for several of the other figures. Andy Warhol on the right, Sargent's Madam X on the left, and Munch's screaming figure behind her. Here, a study in foreshortening was used. Source material is found for the drape, the wolf, the deer, the basket, and the landscape events. Here, a similar study was used. A great job imagining and researching the medical equipment and setting, and well composed with the handwriting and doctor on the left balanced by the curtain on the right. So go through your figure drawings. Could be a self-portrait you did for this course, or if you meet with a figure drawing group periodically, you may have a stack of possible drawings to use. Either will work. The central idea is to imagine a new environment for the figure and search out the materials you'll need to be able to do this convincingly. Incidentally, this drawing by Norman Lundin was made in a similar way. He drew the basics of the figure using the model. Then, after she'd finished posing, he invented the blackboard and the play of light and shadow. You might also find an opportunity to pose a specific model in an environment with narrative intent. If you have someone who's willing to pose for you or you belong to a figure drawing group, this is a great project because posing a model can involve much more than just having the person sit or stand in a given way. I quoted this from earlier, E.L. Doctorow, but it's worth repeating here. He wrote, "After the set is lit, the camera is positioned, the actors have taken their place, costumed, their hair dressed to indicate economic class, education, age, social status, virtue or the lack of it. 95% of the meaning of a scene is established before anyone says a word." So in forming the pose, consider what the person's doing and why. Consider the mood of the scene and the subject being addressed. Think about the room where you're drawing and how a section of it could be transformed. Will you put the model in the center of the room, against a wall, in a corner by a window? What kind of light will you use? A strong directional light, dispersed light, colored light, a candle, flashlight, light from a television or laptop? It's great if you have access to professional models. This allows you to pose the person nude, costumed, or some mix of the two. But if nude, consider why the figure's nude. In drawing classes, the model's routinely nude, but the nudity can take on a kind of banality. It's an accepted fact that there's a naked person in the room and everyone's staring and drawing. It's a figure drawing class, and the drawings generally betray the fact. They look like drawings of a model posing in a classroom. But if the model's wearing a bra or t-shirt and nothing else, it can add a narrative quality. Depending on the pose and how the scene's set, it could appear as someone caught in an intimate moment in their home. Similarly, if the model's costumed, it's important to ask what they're wearing and why. And consider the rest of the setup. What kind of furniture is involved? Are there chairs, tables, lamps, a carpet? And what kind? How's it all arranged? This is just the kind of scene setting that Vermeer did so wonderfully. Every carpet, map, chair, and picture was chosen and posed with exquisite care. You can work through your ideas before meeting with a model by making small sketches to help you visualize what you might want to set up. Once you've set up the scene you intend to draw, take some time to look at it carefully and ask yourself if there are any ways to improve it. I routinely ask my students at the University of Washington to pose the model. One proposed blindfolding and binding the model's hands, very dramatic. Another came in with a set of props, a Viking helmet, sunglasses, a fur coat, and a skull, setting a directional light through a great horned cast shadow on the wall. In another class, we set up a murder scene, replete with toppled chair, knife, and rubber rat, warishly lit. We've also taken these kinds of drawings done directly from observation and then used them as a basis for another drawing. I remember a variation on this last one that had us in an apartment looking out the window into the window of the building across the street to reveal the murder scene, Hitchcockian. These kinds of projects allow you to weave observation, imagination, and constructive drawing methods together to create things that you'd be hard-pressed to draw from observation alone. Here's another project that requires connecting observation and constructive methods. It can also require finding source materials. I call it an imaginary self-portrait. In essence, you draw yourself from direct observation, but the rest of the drawing is made using linear perspective and other constructive methods. You'll notice here that there's a mix of line and hatching. It's used hierarchically to make us pay attention to the figure and tree. The one real bit of solid value occurs in the eye, and that predictably becomes the focal point. The next group of projects are more advanced. While you'll still be dealing with a range of technical issues, your main goal is to locate areas of personal interest and relate these to drawing. An area of personal interest could be anything. Nature has inspired many artists, from visual artists to poets to composers. So has love. But it could equally be something quite different, more abstract, like measuring. That subject really impelled Dürer, and several hundred years later, Giacometti. Leonardo had various themes or ideas he returned to repeatedly in his drawings, from human anatomy to the grotesque, to the movement of water and geometrical pattern. Michael Gibson, writing in the International Herald Tribune, reported on a conversation Picasso had with André Malraux, in which he said he believed in themes that, quote, included such things as birth, pregnancy, suffering, murder, the couple, death, revolt, and possibly the kiss, unquote. Clearly, much 20th and 21st century art has revolved around themes associated with war, politics, class, ethnicity, sexual identity, and the environment, among many others. On the flip side, an area of interest could be formal. Mondrian or Morandi were primarily interested in the relationship of 2D to 3D space, Monet with color and light. The first project's goal to locate content or subject matter. Find source material that's meaningful to you, where the subject plays an important role and is successfully presented, and something you'd like to use as the basis for your own work. It could be a traditional artwork, like a painting, sculpture, or photograph, or something from the web, or from popular culture, from a YouTube video, a piece of animation, a film clip, or a video game, or something from TV. Could be an ad, or it could be something else like a map, a diagram, or a chart. Or it could be textual, something from literature, a poem, a lyric, or a piece of music, or something related to science, history, politics, or economics, or related to any of the other interests you have. It could be fashion, sports, food, or gardening. Gather your source material first, hard copy or digital files. Ask yourself questions about the materials you've gathered like these. What's the subject? How's it being addressed formally? Why do you feel it's successful? How do you intend to use it? If you've been working through this course with a friend or family member, having these discussions with someone else can be invaluable, either in person or via email or phone. If not, use writing. Pursue a dialogue with yourself. As we've seen, Leonardo, Dürer, Van Gogh all write about their studio concerns. Many artists do. It can be an extremely useful tool. So now you've selected your source material and have a sense about how you use it. The next step is to determine what material you use and at what scale. Make some notes about this too. Then, ask yourself how you intend to make your drawing. Will it be a line drawing, partially lined with some value, or fully in value, or color? How will it be composed? What about space and proportion? Will there be mark or texture? All the things you've painstakingly studied now have to be considered in view of expression, as they relate to your theme or idea. When you've completed your drawing, give yourself a critique. Ask yourself what's working well and what's not. Based on this assessment, you may want to work back into the drawing and repeat this step. When you've gone as far as you can, ask yourself if the subject or content is something you want to continue with. If it is, you could use this drawing as a basis for a second, third, or fourth drawing. If this drawing was done with line, you might want to try color. If value, line. If small, try it at a larger scale, or try recomposing the elements. If this isn't something you'd like to pursue, you could identify a new theme or subject and try again. Working this way takes time. It's hit or miss. So give yourself multiple opportunities. One way to shake things up is to vary the materials in some unexpected way. These last three projects do just this. The first is a value drawing using charcoal on primed canvas. I'd suggest making the drawing at least 32 inches in one direction. That gives it some heft. The other dimensions up to you and should be dictated by compositional considerations. To do this project, you'll need a piece of unstretched canvas or linen that you'll prime with gesso. Tack the canvas to a wall, large drawing board, or a piece of plywood. Make sure you tack at regular intervals so the surface will remain flat. Give the canvas at least 2 coats, one horizontal, let it dry, then another vertical. Once fully dry, start the drawing with fine charcoal. As your composition becomes clear, you can use compressed and charcoal pencil too. One of the great things about charcoal on prime canvas is that it's so forgiving. It takes a great deal of erasure with little wear and tear. You can even wash the charcoal off with mild soap and water to get back to a very white surface. And of course, you can always fix an area and reprime to get back to virgin white. When I do this with my advanced drawing students, after they've completed this project, we have a critique. The central question we ask is this: is there a theme that's emerging that would suggest a group of works that relate across this theme? Here's an example of one of these charcoal on canvas drawings, a memorable drawing that emerged from the student's thoughts about how technology is omnipresent and invasive. I think you can see how a drawing like this might well lead to other drawings dealing with our relationship to technology. Another structure you might use to further develop your subject matter is a triptych, a work made of 3 separate but related panels. If you haven't seen many triptychs, look up Hieronymus Bosch, Hans Memling, Max Beckmann, and Francis Bacon. This one's by the 19th century Japanese artist Utagawa Hiroshige, a great proponent of the form. As a further challenge, you could try this project using black and white acrylic on 3 sheets of a heavier artist grade paper. Use the paint as a drawing medium, use the black to make line, the white to eliminate it. Start with small notebook drawings to begin to develop your idea. Then collect the source material you'll need to move forward. This last project brings us back to Blombos Cave, where we began in Lecture 1. People have been making art for a very long time. People have had paper for a pretty short time, and the convenience of art stores for even less. This project takes us back to our roots, maybe literally to roots. The challenge is to make a drawing without any art store materials. One of the opportunities here is to capitalize on the way materiality relates to a given subject, the way materials might even suggest a subject. Over the years, I've seen many interesting examples spanning drawings made by dripping wax on wood, or drawing with wine on a bedsheet, or even lipstick on a pork belly. These approaches can be evocative and provocative. Drawing, like many other pursuits, returns dividends in proportion to investment. The more you put in, the more you're likely to get out. And the more you work on areas that are difficult for you, the more you'll advance well beyond what you assumed were your own limitations. Evaluate your skills and be frank about your areas of greatest difficulty. Zero in on those aspects and practice them repeatedly. The difficulty will diminish. Find what you love to draw. This will motivate you and lead you to your own creative discoveries. Thank you.